Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to having and talking with Brett Kaufman, founder of Kaufman Development and the Gravity Project. He's a speaker, advisor, and a coach. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him too as we kind of jump in. Brett is a builder of conscious communities, believing that success comes easiest when working from one's highest and best self. This has motivated his work to be centered around mental health and well-being and creative expression. Brett's vision of creating spaces that provide healthy, sustainable, and holistically supportive environments for people to work and live led to the founding of Kaufman Development in 2011, which has changed the real estate development landscape in one of the country's fastest growing cities. So, Brett, where I really want to start with you is, you're a developer and you're developing these communities. And I just want to kind of talk what you're consciously doing, because what it sounds like to me is there's just a higher level of thoughts and consciousness and maybe dignity that you're looking to give people as far as the space where they live and play. So can you just kind of talk about how you're doing that? Because I used to sell apartments, and I've been into apartment buildings, and I've been into so many apartment buildings. And one of the things is a lot of times they don't have what you're doing. And so it really seems to be very groundbreaking. So I just kind of want to kind of unwind that and understand kind of A, where it came from, and B, how you rolled something like that out and what it really feels like for the person who's living in one of your communities.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I'm happy to be with you today and hop into that, subject. It's really kind of a little bit more complicated than just kind of the end product. Really, as we talked about when you were on my podcast, this is my kind of life's work. My journey in life has kind of led me to want to build these communities and do the work that I'm doing, which is, continually evolving too. And so it backs up really to my experience in my career, which was that I was working in cultures and corporate cultures that had me disenfranchised with my work, feeling like it was really work, and that there was all these other things that were outside of work that were considered to be hobbies, things you did on the weekends or on vacation or later in life. And so I started my company to try to bring all those things I was personally passionate about, things that I thought were kind of aligned with my highest expression, into the company and then into the communities that we would build, and allow the people that lived and worked in our communities the easy access to the things that they were passionate about. So that maybe it wouldn't be like, instead of volunteering, which seems sometimes like a cumbersome thing to navigate, where you've got to go through all the red tape and figure out and get somebody to call you back. They're short staffed. It's tough just to go volunteer. And so you end up sitting on the couch and watching TV and drinking or doing whatever you're doing. Why don't we bring that right to them? Why don't we bring community gardens and opportunities for speakers and content and ways for people to really connect to the things that they're passionate about, that higher self in them, make it easily accessible. And so that's really, kind of always been at the core of our company. And it's, as we continue to evolve, Gravity, as we talk about consciousness, we're really trying to bring these modalities that people might, in our case, we're in the Midwest, we're in Columbus, Ohio. If you don't live in California and New York, you might not have access to the content about healing and mind, body, and spirit and art and creative expression. These things aren't really readily available, or they are, but they're not centrally located. So we're trying to bring that to the community right where you live and right where you work.
I love it. I love everything that you're talking about right now. And I want to dive into a little bit how you talk about, your life's work. I think a lot of times, especially right now during COVID, as we're sitting here, it's October 28th. And I think people are really getting more in touch with their personal values these last, 7-8 months, and trying to figure out, with a lot of reflection, what their path is and what their life's work is. And I always find that, people are really gravitate to somebody who can say with a lot of conviction, this is my life's work. So how did you know it? When did you know it? And when did you really start, acting to build what was in your life's work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say that kind of the disclaimer to that is my life's work continues to evolve and change. And so my life's work is not just building communities. It's not real estate. It started to become my life's work early on, I guess, to answer your question, as I was having those experiences, working in other cultures, working in other companies, I realized through a variety of things. We talked a little bit about this, but Landmark Forum, Summit Series, Built to Lead, a coaching system, these things kind of emerged in my life, and they helped me understand the concept that you could love your work, that you could actually author your own life, that you could actually do big things, that you didn't have to, I don't know, have gone to an Ivy League school or done something that maybe I had some kind of a story about, that, maybe I was just meant to work in a job every day. And I got the understanding that that did not have to be the case, that I could do something that anybody else had done. Why not me? I could be in control of my own life. I could write my own movie. I could direct it. And so that is really what I mean by my life's work, where I started this company with this idea that my life and my work could be one, and they could be aligned, and it could be the things that I love that I get to do every day. And that has been my experience in building these communities and building real estate, but I've also changed and evolved. And so now I'm applying these concepts, this alignment concept, the concept of loving your work, the concept of being your best self, to other things that I'm doing, investing, coaching, speaking, supporting other people. There's a lot of ways for me to try to kind of live into that life's work.
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about alignment for a little bit. We got introduced through Dave Meltzer, who's my business coach. And, one of the things that Dave talks about, and I talk a lot about with him, is alignment. And that when you're in alignment, you can take action in a more fluid way. And when you're in an adjustment period, it's kind of hard to kind of get back into alignment. So for the people listening now who are kind of in that adjustment phase of whether it's their career or them thinking about wanting to start a side career, or they're listening to you and they're inspired by saying, hey, I want to be the author of my own life. What's that kind of first or second step to, raising their awareness, raising their consciousness, and getting themselves into alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I think right out of the gate, like if you are asking that question, if you're thinking about that, then you got to know you're ahead of most people, because that means you're awakening. You're now awake to the point to the fact that there's something else that you're not happy with, and something else that you want to change and improve. So right away, that's like a great start. For me, I think that the thing that I like to coach people on really is that you've got to know who you are. You've got to know what you believe. You've got to know your identity and your purpose. And those things can be written about. I like to take people through a series of discovery questions where we ask questions about, what do you believe about life, about death, about work, about jobs, careers, family? What do you know? What do you not know about yourself? And once you start to kind of understand who you are and what your purpose is and what you believe, then you can start to think about what you want to do.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we'll go right to the doing, and you got to figure out first kind of, why and who and what, and then, there's plenty of time to do. The other thing that I'll say, just, from like, actually figuring it out, what are you going to do? I like to do an exercise called Love Twos, where you just write out everything that you love and you don't think about work. It's not about work. It's just like, I love the leaves falling. I love to, laugh. I love to get a massage, whatever it is you love. Right. And you make that list. And when you're done, you make it longer and you make it longer until you can't make it longer anymore. And then you start to think, well, what's in here I could maybe make my work?
Yeah, I love that. Let's talk about the pause to actually do that, because I love everything that you're talking about, but it seems like, a lot of times people feel right now they actually have less personal time because they're stuck in their homes. They have to really carve out that time. They've got a lot of things they're doing on a day-to-day basis. They've got their family, right? Come up with a lot of different things. But how does somebody begin to carve out that time to really pause and actually do that foundational bedrock work?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm privileged. I've kind of worked myself into a position where I have the ability to say yes and no to certain things and be more in control of my calendar. But that said, I don't think time is ever really the issue. If you were to look at somebody's schedule that's really busy, I guarantee you there's some point in their day, there's some period of time, whether it be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, or hours, where they're doing something other than thinking or putting some attention into what they want for themselves. They're
Yeah,
watching TV, they're on their phones, they're doing something else. And so it's not really time. It's more of like a creative block. It's more of like a traumatic block. There's some kind of fear or doubt or worry, or I'm not enough, or I can't do it, or some story that is keeping people from just taking the time. And it's really, a matter of just committing to it and starting. And it's so cliche, but you just have to start with a journaling exercise, start with a meditation apps. There's plenty of free content. Listen to a podcast, read a book, go to the library. Money isn't really the determining factor as much as people think either. Today there is content for days, months, years
yeah,
available for free that you can start somewhere. And there's so many little things over time really do lead to change.
yeah, yeah. I, I love everything that you're talking about, because it really is about ownership and just no excuses, right? No excuses, and just, but and I loved everything you had to say, but I want to talk to the person who's really just kind of swamped right now, as far as picking that one thing, because you do a lot of coaching in this area, right? So to the person who's saying to you, my kids are home from school, I'm in home office, they're in school 2 hours a day, and then there's shuttling going back and forth, there's work people in my house, the dogs are barking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you get someone to just, start even changing that script in their head, so they can at least kind of, find that first 1 to 5 minutes, Brett?
Yeah. Listen, I want to just acknowledge that there are some people that literally just don't have 1 to 5 minutes. I believe that probably is true right now for some people who have it really, really hard, whatever it might be, health or poverty. I mean, there are people that don't have that time. And if you don't have that time for whatever reason, it's just not the time for it. And just start there. Just say, I'm not going to make myself wrong, bad. I'm not going to beat myself up. It's just not my time. My time will come later. Now, you can't say my time will come later forever, because you don't know, as we've talked about, if you're
Right.
going to have your time. But for those that do, and I believe most people do, I think you got to start with something that you can really chew on. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And
Yeah.
if it's hard for you to meditate, because meditating would be kind of the thing that I would go to first, then journal. If it's hard for you to journal, then go for a run. If it's hard for you to go for a run, go for a walk. Walk around the block, listen to your thoughts. Just start somewhere. These things, movement, moving energy is really the key, whether you do that through meditation, whether you do that through journaling, whether you do that for running, walking, exercising, whatever other practice you have. Move the energy, get the thoughts out of your head, out of your body, and let them move out so that you can create space to start to let what really needs to come out emerge.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm 48. When I was, I think, 26 or 27, I met my wife, and she was going to a holistic doctor, Dr. Darren Weissman in Chicago. She's from Detroit, but was living in Chicago. And I had kind of inherited, like grown into some of these allergies to certain foods and this and the other. So he said, you got to go to my holistic doctor. So I go to this guy, and he starts just like talking to my body, moving my arm, kind of like asking my body questions. Starts kind of like doing this and moving some energy around. And I slowly started kind of, I was lactose intolerant, and then he got rid of it. When I ate meat, I got, I felt like I was like allergic to certain foods, and then he just kind of cleared everything out. And he was just realigning my energy. He was this amazing, holistic energy doctor. So when you talk about, the key is just moving energy, that was the first time I had been exposed to that type of healer. I have a Western doctor as well, but it was incredible. Just the power of watching that happen specifically to myself.
Yeah, I mean, your body does ultimately kind of tell everything. So, it does get stored up in the body. I mean, there's a lot of science about this now. It used to be a little bit woo-woo. Dr. Sarno, kind of made it famous over back pain. The body keeps the score. There's a lot of content out there now, but I do believe a lot of injuries, a lot of disease, a lot of illness does come from us storing up the trauma, storing up the thoughts, storing up, whatever it is we're not releasing, and it's got to go somewhere. It just makes sense. It's got to land somewhere, and it often lands in the body. And if it's not being moved one way or another, over time, it's problematic.
Yeah. So what led you to this type of work, right? So what led you to the more conscious ways of giving people a space where, there's easy access to, all of these speakers and, everything that you're doing in your communities. If you kind of rewind your life a little bit, where was the seed that was planted that led you to today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's a part of it that just is kind of my purpose that I was probably born into, and it's part of my DNA and part of probably in my belief, why I'm here. Part of, the grand architecture was just for me to be, kind of in this line of work. Part of it is because I grew up in a family where in my early years, there was chaos and addiction and abuse and things that kind of had me either grow over time more sensitive to other human beings, or what I really believe is it just kind of took me off my path, and then eventually, because I was off my path, I got to really see and feel what it's like to be on my path. Sometimes I think you have to really, and I guess in that kind of line of thinking, there's nothing that's really off your path, right? But if I had to go that direction so I could really feel what I didn't want, so I could come back this direction, that was part of my journey too. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think to answer your question, I think, what I have landed on is just me. It's just who I am. And the more that I can kind of lean into that, and it's still a work in process. I mean, it takes time. The reason I went into those other jobs is because I was programmed at the time about looking good, about making money, about being a man, being a success, going into business. Business was the thing that was valued, right? So that was kind of how I grew up. That's what I did. But I all along kind of knew that wasn't really who I was. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing, what I thought looked good, but not who I really was. So it's a process of returning to who you really are. And there were times along the way early on where I discovered books on tape, where I sat in a psych class, when I went to therapy when I was a little kid. These were like the hits that I had along the way, that's the stuff that I love. That's who I am. That's the stuff I'm passionate about. I just didn't have the courage to actually go into that for my work based on that programming.
Yeah, it's great. I love the way that you articulated all of that. So let's talk about some of the, the tapes, the books, the lessons. Who are some of the people, the mentors, whether you know them or not, that have helped shape you to help accelerate and grow, the conscious Brett Kaufman of today?
Yeah, I mean, early on, it was like Wayne Dyer and How to Win Friends and Influence People. I mean, these were kind of like the first like blow your mind kind of entry into the self-help world. But like I said, I went to therapy when I was 10 years old, maybe 8 years old even. My parents were getting a divorce. My mom took my sister and I to therapy. My sister hated it, never went back. I said, when can we go again? And have never stopped going. So I've had, incredible therapists in and out of my life in various ways. I've had incredible mentors. I really do point to mentorship that really did kind of direct me along the way into things that were profoundly impactful. I had a coach still that I work with to this day. Coaches, really, I mean, I've had multiple coaches in my life that have been profoundly helpful. Like I said, the Landmark Forum. I did learn to meditate. You and I both, I think, are TM guys. So I got the gift of transcendental meditation when I graduated from college. That's been a huge constant for me. And the kind of like self-help names or gurus, they've kind of come and gone over the years. There's been many. I love to read. I love to, now podcast instead of books on tape, although, sometimes I'll do Audible. I'm just kind of a growth junkie. I love the work. I love to learn. I love to read. I'll kind of digest it, any way I can.
Yeah, I love it. Talk about you a little bit, the entrepreneur. You in 2014, you were the Ernst & Young Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year in 2014. Your company, Kaufman Development, has been included in the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies. Today, when we look at today and we're sitting here October 28th, 2020, pre-COVID studies have shown that by the year 2030, 85% of the jobs that exist don't exist today. By the year 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. That doesn't include Gen Zs. By the year 2027, about 50% of the world will be freelancers. And then COVID hits and I think accelerated a lot of that. We have a lot of young adults graduating college today in a totally different world, and I think a totally different decade that was already in the works, but now accelerated because of COVID. And so what is your words of wisdom to the young adults graduating college today on what being an entrepreneur today means versus even a year ago?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that you could certainly look at the unemployment numbers and the broader climate and say, boy, this is a terrible time to be graduating from college and going out and trying to find a job. And I know young people that are in that position, and it is really hard right now to go find a job. On the other hand, because of COVID and before COVID, as you outlined, the world was already changing. And it's never been easier to start a business. It's never been easier to raise capital. It's never been easier to find people to collaborate with. I think, maybe it's just the little bubble that I live in. It's pretty easy to find people to mentor you and to coach you and to support you and to give you advice. I mean, because of the social networks that exist, you're able to find people, to track them down, to send them messages, to bother them to the point that they might respond.
Right.
I think in a lot of ways, and really maybe even more importantly than kind of the modalities of how you make this happen, there is a acceptance. There's an acceptance and maybe even like an honoring of people going out and being creative, creating something, making their own life, more so than I think, when I was coming out of school, where it was kind of not only known, like, you go get a job, but you better get a good one. You better, as we were talking about before, like for me, it was like, you better put on a suit and tie.
Yeah.
You better have a business card, and you better make some money. Now it's, thanks to, a lot of people out there, the Gary V's of the world and people that are kind of, really preaching, no, go start somewhere where you really are passionate and spend 10 years not making money you know, don't make any money. Go just grind
Yeah.
until you find what it is you want to do with the rest of your life. And that culture, I think, is really much more prevalent today than it ever was.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said earlier, find your why, find your who, find your what. Plenty of time to do. Plenty of time to do. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that is true. All right, Brett, you ready for a quick speed round?
Sure.
All right. Favorite book and why?
Good question. I like to recommend Michael Singer's Surrender Experiment. And the reason why is because I think it's very easy, simple read. It tells a pretty profound story, but it also gives you kind of the business lens as well as the spiritual lens. I mean, I love Michael Singer. Most people like The Untethered Soul. I also recommend that book, but I think Surrender Experiment for me, just kind of going with the overall saying yes to whatever comes your way and trusting in it has been so profoundly helpful for me.
Yeah, I love both those books. I'm glad you brought those up. I'll add one book to that I always kind of, for some reason, connect with those books. Is the art of the War of Arts by Pressfield, which is such a great book, all about resistance and why we resist the most important things that we need to do. Great.
Pressfield's awesome. I love his work too. He actually just wrote the foreword for a friend of mine who's coming out. Actually, the coach that I work with is releasing a book next month that Pressfield wrote. And he says Pressfield is as good of a person as he is an author. They got connected through a mutual friend. He took hours with him, and he's awesome.
Oh, it's great. Well, his work is so profound and simple. It's almost like his book is so simple it's complicated, but he really articulates, what I think is one of a big issue that many people have. I learned a ton from his book. I mean, it has stuck with me ever since I read it. Right.
Yeah. And, great.
I loved it. One word that defines you, Brett.
Let's see. One word that defines me. I think compassion is probably the word that I like to use to describe me. I don't generally like to use words to describe me at all, but I have like a real sense of compassion for people. It's like almost a problem. I see maybe people doing terrible things, and I just want to like say, what happened? How can I help you? Empathy and compassion are kind of two things that I really lead with.
Yeah. Love it. Best piece of wisdom you ever received?
There's a Carl Jung quote that I will butcher, but it's well known, and it's basically the most damaging thing you can do to your kids is the unlived life of the parent. And when I kind of heard that me not living in alignment, authoring my own life, being kind of fully expressed and happy was actually damaging to my kids, that they weren't not only getting the best of me, but they were also going to learn that kind of behavior as well. That kind of really seared me, that I have an obligation to really author my own life and live in alignment, that this wasn't just a matter of like my happiness. This is a matter of like generational obligation.
I love it. I love that. You are a coach, Brett. You're a mentor to many people, many entrepreneurs, many business people. You use a framework that taps into, in your words, a person's life journey and provides tools through meditation, through therapy, and personal development. Tell everybody, and your real estate world, but tell everybody, who your ideal clients are and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I like to work with entrepreneurs, and really what I've been focused on is kind of investing and coaching into entrepreneurs that really want to create from their essence, and create something that has a real value to humanity. So I'm interested in human beings and organizations and products that are all aimed at making the world a better place. That said, I don't just work with entrepreneurs. I've counseled many friends and others that are just in tough points in their life. And so, it's got to really be somebody that wants to do the work and is really passionate about living their best life.
Yeah, love it. And how can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on kind of all the social media. Brett Kaufman on Instagram, B Kaufman125 at Twitter. I'm kind of out there. You'll find me. Brett-Kaufman is my website. Liv Kaufman, gravityproject.com. They're kind of all out there to get a feel for what I'm up to.
Want to talk about the Gravity Project before we close out?
Yeah, Gravity is just kind of our fullest expression of the work. It's really a big mixed use community with hundreds of apartments and office and retail and event spaces. And there's a TM center and there's just constant kind of activity and programming, all the things that I shared with you earlier that we build into our communities. Gravity really embodies all of that. There's a big second phase that we're just getting ready to start across the street. That'll be more residential, more office, more kind of high-end experiential, immersive art, big murals, all kinds of kind of creative spaces to really encourage that well-being, that creative expression, and that impact that our company is founded on.
I love it. I love it. Brett, it's great. I loved being on your podcast last week. I loved continuing our talk today. I appreciate everything that you talked about today and a bunch of the stuff that you shared about loving your work and being the author of your life, the importance of being into alignment, not only for you, but your children. For those people who need a quick exercise, love to is write out everything you love and then figure out what your life is gonna be, how you set up your world and everything for the people that are in your communities to tap into their creativeness and talking about creative things. And I'm a big fan of things compound and little things over time really do lead to big change. I talk a lot about thinking big, and the way I define it is small things done every day that lead to something big. Even if it's 30 seconds a day, meditating, journaling, going for a walk. I mean, really great things to nurture and take care of yourself, to really tap into, your best self. And if you're looking to start that business, you do all those things. You do, like you said in your earlier, you find that space to kind of get to some additional things in your life. So I appreciate you. To all the Think community, Brett can be found at brett-kaufman.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. And Brett, thanks so much for being on the show and sharing your story. And it's great to connect with you today, and looking forward to continued talks.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I can't wait to release our podcast. I should probably mention the Gravity podcast. You will be coming up in an episode soon. It was a great conversation. One of my favorite recordings we've done. And it's awesome to have a chance to be with you today and to spend some time together.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.